Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasna Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhastya Chadeshatane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha Paditanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Srila Prabhupada ki jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. So devotees, last night, we completed up to verse 16, which was the end of the third section of Bhagavad Gita, of the fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and now we move on to the fourth section, from verse 17 to verse 26, where the subject matter is liberation through focusing one's consciousness on the Supersoul. On the Supersoul. So that's an interesting little variation, actually, on what we've really been doing. So there are two subsections here. The first subsection is from verse 17 to verse 23, and then the second one, of course, is from 24 to 26, which is the end of the fourth section. So here, in the first subsection, from verse 17 to verse 23, then the idea is that the person who has learnt the knowledge that we were discussing, like last night, and other nights also, about the Supreme Lord, the body, our bodies as being vehicles, and we're quite independent of our bodies, and therefore we're quite independent of bodily experiences and the feelings, emotions, psychology, and everything which is going on the bodily or mental platform. So, having learnt all these things, the person in karma yoga, advanced karma yoga, remember that from last night, very advanced karma yoga, or devotional service. We noted, of course, in a number of places where Srila Prabhupada is not just saying karma yoga, but he's also introducing the idea of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. So this is further explanation of what is the state of mind, what is the consciousness of such a karma yogi or devotee, and what is the vision? What is the vision of such a personality? And as the section heading, liberation through focusing one's consciousness on the Supersoul, as that heading there is saying that there's a connection here with the Supersoul. We'll see particularly in verse 18, Prabhupada's very emphatic about this advanced karma yogi or devotee seeing things in certain ways because of the presence of the Supersoul, which has not really been mentioned so specifically in previous verses or chapters for that matter. It's been more sometimes something to do with Brahman or directly Krishna himself. So now this is introducing more specifically and a bit emphatically the presence of the Supersoul, who is here as a manifestation of the Lord within this material world for all living entities. Yes. So, okay. So this person, this yogi, this devotee, understands what the material world is like, and therefore is not attached, doesn't relish, doesn't really feel interested in what's going on the material platform. Okay, so we will read now from 17 to 23, just the verses. So please listen carefully. 17. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. Well, like we mentioned last night, this is the same person who we were talking about last night. And as we said, this person is very advanced. This is not just some sort of beginner. This is an experienced, very serious practitioner of karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga, basically very detached, based on understanding the presence of the Lord everywhere, karma yogi, or a devotee, advanced devotee. Right, proceeds straight on the path of liberation. And 18, the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater, outcast. Okay. 19, those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They're flawless like Brahman, and thus they're already situated in Brahman. 20, a person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. 21. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. 22. An intelligent person who does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. 23. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. All right. So back to 17. Let's go through in a little detail here. 17. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. Well, as we've mentioned a few times now, this is describing an advanced yogi, karma yogi, or advanced devotee. This is one of the things which distinguishes what is presented in chapter 5 from what is presented in chapter 3. Chapter 3, it was more just a basic introduction to the subject that, what can you do? You have to act, because the body is going to act anyway, whether you like it or not. It's the nature of the soul also to act. Why not act to set an example? These are some of the ideas in chapter 3. But here, a fairly substantial part of the purport, I think it's more than half, is describing in detail this advanced personality. This personality is on a very high level. Yes, because, when one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, what's the Supreme? Well, that's Krishna. That's Krishna. We've read enough descriptions of the Supreme as being Krishna by now to know that whenever the Supreme is mentioned, Krishna is being referred to. Yes, so in the purport, Prabhupada mentions how there's Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Bhagavan, of course, is the highest. And therefore, when one's mind, intelligence, faith, and refuge, as stated in the verse, are always in Krishna, then one is cleansed of all misgivings, of all doubts, and just any other ideas, non-Krishna conscious ideas, and one is in, or basically in, perfect knowledge. And among other things, among other things, the devotee understands right at the end, the last sentence. A Krishna conscious person can thoroughly understand that there is duality, simultaneous identity and individuality in Krishna. Means simultaneous oneness and difference in Krishna. And equipped with transcendental knowledge, one can make steady progress on the path of liberation. So let's go on now to verse 18. It's a very important verse here because it gives us a particular perspective on this series of verses at least, but also just on, the whole chapter, but particularly the second half of the chapter, that the Supersoul is there, and the Supersoul is playing an important part in what's going on in this world. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater outcast. So we'll have a look at the purport. We'll read through, not the whole thing, but some parts of it. But the main point that we'll be looking out for here is that Srila Prabhupada explains that this equal vision, which is arising from the true knowledge, this equal vision, and just, it's like equality in so many respects. Equal to happiness, distress, equal to heat and cold. Equality, there's this theme, nature of equality, equanimity in the person, in this person. And where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from Krishna, of course, but more specifically, as Prabhupada points out here, it's through an appreciation of the presence of the Supersoul. Yes, in all sorts of living entities and in all sorts of situations. That's the main point. So it's not just a question of the soul. Soul's there, that's fine. But the Supersoul is playing an extremely important part. Let's just go to the purport and take out a few examples to illustrate how Prabhupada is relating all of this to the Supersoul. Well, let's see. In the third sentence. Well, let's just read and just see, because it really is important. A Krishna-conscious person does not make any distinction between species or castes. The Brahmin and the outcast may be different from the social point of view, or a dog, a cow, and an elephant may be different from the point of view of species. But these differences of body are meaningless from the viewpoint of a learned transcendentalist, this person who's really advanced. This is due to their relationship to the Supreme, for the Supreme Lord, by his plenary portion as Paramatma, is present in everyone's heart. Yes. Such an understanding of the Supreme as real knowledge, as far as the bodies are concerned in different castes or different species of life, the Lord is equally kind to everyone, because he treats every living being as a friend, yet maintains himself as Paramatma regardless of the circumstances of the living entities. The Lord as Paramatma is present both in the outcast and in the Brahmin, and like this. So you see, there's, several mentions. This theme is being emphasized. And further too, just down a bit, the similarity in the quality. Oh, well, anyway, you can see, if you just look down, soul and the Supersoul are being discussed just a little bit further down. The similarity in the quality of the soul and the Supersoul, however, doesn't make them equal in quantity, for the individual soul is present only in that particular body, whereas the Paramatma is present in each and every body. So you get the idea. Supersoul is being stressed here as being a real factor in the sense of understanding of the Supersoul being a real factor in the different aspects of the advanced consciousness of this karma yogi or devotee. And as we read on, we'll see that even though the Supersoul may not be mentioned as much as he's mentioned in this purport here, but the symptoms coming from realization or appreciation of the Supersoul, they're definitely mentioned, and indicating that this is all due to the person's connection with the Supersoul. So 19, those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They're flawless like Brahman, and thus they're already situated in Brahman. So again, sameness and equanimity. This is a characteristic of someone who has realized or at least accepts the existence of the Supersoul. Actually, we have a question for our Bhakti Shastri students. In fact, it's based on verse 18, which we just read a few minutes ago. But let's just have a look here. And so it's based on that, but it's specifically referring to Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila chapter 19, verse 138 purport. Madhya Lila 19, 138 purport, in which Prabhupada says, the living entities are described or are said to belong to 8,400,000 species. There are 900,000 species living in the water. There are also 2 million non-moving living entities such as trees and plants. There are also 1,100,000 species of insects and reptiles, and there are 1 million species of birds. As far as quadrupeds, four-legged animals are concerned, there are 3 million varieties, and there are 400,000 human species. Some of these species may exist on one planet and not on another. But in any case, within all the planets of the universe and even in the sun, there are living entities. So the question is, you must cite, refer to a purport which we have mentioned, which is describing the 8,400,000 species of life, and then you must give the breakdown. How many species in the water and how many humans and animals and all that. Okay. Oh, you're going to have to work on that one. And just as a little point of interest, Prabhupada says some of these species may exist on one planet and not on another. So one time, one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, out of the 400,000 human species, how many do we have on planet Earth? Prabhupada said, maybe 2,000. And then Prabhupada said, no, maybe only 1,000. That means there are many different types of human beings we have no experience of. All right, so let's carry on. So we were looking at 19 there. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity, from verse 18, because of their consciousness of the Supersoul. That's not in the verse, but that's just the point, or one of the points. They've already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They're flawless like Brahman, and thus they're already situated in Brahman. Yes, so yes, well that's interesting, that's very important. So this person's not going to take birth again. Prabhupada says the Lord is flawless because he is without attraction or hatred. Similarly, when a living entity is without attraction or hatred, he becomes flawless and eligible to enter into the spiritual sky. Such persons are to be considered already liberated, and their symptoms are described below. So, of course, we already mentioned how they're exhibiting symptoms which were stressed in verse 18. So there's the connection with the Supersoul. So verse 20, a person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. So it's not necessarily just entirely the person is into the Supersoul and that's it. But the realization or acceptance, understanding, appreciation of the presence of the Supersoul, the nature of the Supersoul, the functions of the Supersoul are very important in this context of becoming equipoised. And again, just as verse 18 was saying, seeing no difference between the species. So here the person is not seeing a difference between something pleasant or unpleasant, and is not bewildered. Plus he knows the science of God. A Krishna-conscious person, the science of God, and as we mentioned last night, what's kind of the first thing there? What's Krishna's first description of himself as God? Janma karma chame divyam. The foundation of the understanding of this, the foundation of the science of God is to understand that Krishna, his appearance and activities are transcendental. Okay. So, verse 21. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. 21. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So not attracted to material sense pleasure, no interest. Prabhupada in the purport quotes the verse of Yamunacharya, famous verse from a very famous devotee of long ago. Since I've been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. So in other words, and Prabhupada's explaining this in the purport, the devotee is so absorbed in devotional service, he or she just loses taste for material sense pleasure. It's just not interesting any longer. Whereas the materialists, without sex pleasure, at least in so many cases, with that sort of pleasure, they lose motivation. They can't really function. But a devotee works with great vigor without sex pleasure. And this is the test. This is the test of spiritual realization. This is the test of spiritual realization, that the devotee is just not interested in these things, or the test is to what degree a devotee is not interested, or maybe slightly interested, or maybe quite interested, or not interested. These are different levels of advancement in Krishna conscious realization. Yes. All right, and 22. An intelligent person doesn't take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Well, this is a really good verse, just anyway, even if we sort of extract it from its place here in Bhagavad Gita, just in general in terms of the life of a devotee and what a devotee is experiencing in life and the understandings and realizations of the devotee. This is very important, that the devotee who is intelligent, and particularly in this case, of course, you know, who is being talked about is the very advanced yogi or devotee. And again, it depends on the degree of advancement of the devotee, meaning ourselves, on our levels. But if you're intelligent enough in Krishna consciousness, you'll understand that that sense gratification is not the famous source of pleasure and enjoyment which it is thought to be or made out to be by the ordinary people. Rather, it's quite the opposite. It's the source of misery. It's the source of misery. Yes, and among other things, I mean, there's another way, there are a number of ways in which it's the source of misery, but among those various other things, the fact that those pleasures have a beginning and an end, they're all just temporary. That's an important consideration in terms of their being sources of misery. Yeah, that they're sort of will-o'-the-wisp, as they say in old English culture. Just here today, gone tomorrow, just like that. Yeah, not to be taken very seriously. Really no real substance. Certainly no real solid, like permanently existing substance. And of course, the more a person, Prabhupada mentions, the more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he's entrapped by material miseries. What can you say? And as Prabhupada mentions here, let's just have a look. Prabhupada says, what does Prabhupada say? Oh, maybe it's not here. That the nectar drinkers are not interested in eating mud. Oh, it's somewhere else. But Prabhupada does give Bhagavatam 551 in the middle of the purport. My dear sons, there's no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters, the hogs. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life by which your existence will be purified. And as a result, you'll be able to enjoy unlimited, transcendental bliss. All right. So, 23. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he's well situated and is happy in this world. Yes, so, going back some number to yesterday, or even, a few of the days past, our understanding of tolerating the urges of the senses, checking the force of desire and anger, is that we become Krishna conscious and we start getting transcendental pleasure from Krishna consciousness, and then the urges of the senses become just like, who needs them? And the forces of desire and anger, desire and anger, acceptance, rejection, these are two of the dualities which the person who is in knowledge of the Supersoul is not affected by. Plus, just the advanced devotee is not affected by. Yes, so then one becomes very happy. So let's have a look here, verse 23. Srila Prabhupada makes a comment in a class on this very verse. Listen to this. The yoga practice means one should be tolerant. According to their practice, they enter deep water in winter and meditate. In scorching heat in the summer, they sit down in the midst of fires and meditate. These are the processes to learn tolerance. Okay, you ready? You up for that? You want to do that? I've seen them sitting in summer in India surrounded by fire. But Prabhupada continues, fortunately, we do not have to do these things. Instead, we can chant in a nice room like this with deities of Jagannath and derive 1,000 times greater benefit than can be obtained from those practices. It would be very difficult for most people to imitate those practices. It may be possible for 1 or 2 persons, but it cannot be practiced on a mass scale. But this practice of self-realization can be practiced by anyone, even by the children. Means devotional service, Krishna consciousness as we know it. Okay, so that was the first subsection, 17 to 23. Now let's go through the second subsection, 24 to 26. And the subject matter there is that tolerating and checking bodily and mental urges, this advanced yogi, this advanced devotee, his happiness, activities, and goals are within. He's sinless, works for the welfare of all, absorbed in trying for the supreme, and soon he will reach the supreme. So it's just 3 verses. Let me just read through them quickly and then we'll elaborate a bit. 24, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme. 25, those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Okay, and 26. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Wow, how's that? That's great. All right, so back to 24. One whose happiness is within, who's active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So, very advanced, very advanced. We didn't get verses like these last so many in the 3rd chapter, even though it was discussing Karma Yoga. Let's just, where are we? Prabhupada makes the point at the beginning of the purport, unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? Well, that's a good point, isn't it? That's a good point. A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Or, if from within, happiness within. By, for example, like Haridas Thakur, chanting and chanting and chanting. The happiness is coming from within. So this is talking about the advanced Krishna conscious person, like Haridas Thakur. Okay, and 25. So anyway, from 24, we must know we need the higher taste. We need the higher taste. And we can get the higher taste if we really practice very seriously and if we're very attentive in our Krishna consciousness, not whimsical. 25. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So yeah, again, it's referring back to verse 18, that type of realization that all the material differences don't make a difference on the transcendental platform. And that realization comes along with appreciation of the Supersoul. Yes. So when one is aware that Krishna is the fountainhead of everything and everyone, then one can understand what will help everyone. And therefore, equally, one can give Krishna consciousness to everyone, not really discriminating so much, giving it to everyone. And, well, Srila Prabhupada mentions it's in the 3rd sentence, in the beginning of part of the paragraph. The sufferings of humanity are due to forgetfulness of Krishna as the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend. Now, if you're familiar enough with Bhagavad Gita, you would know that here Srila Prabhupada, in this purport of verse 25, is actually referring to verse 29, which we're going to read just shortly, which is describing Krishna as the supreme enjoyer, proprietor, and friend, very specifically. And Prabhupada titled that verse, The Peace Formula, how people can actually attain peace in this world. Yeah, and if we understand these things, then we can help others. If we don't understand these things, then we can't help others. Just helping their bodies. And here's something from a class of Prabhupada's on, well, somewhere around here. Prabhupada says, Kshina Kalmasha, which is from this verse, one who's able to reduce the reaction of all sinful life by practicing sense control. Okay? Just like a diseased person, by obedience to the doctor and by controlling himself, the suffering from the disease is reduced. Similarly, we have to reduce the temperature. We think that by increasing the temperature, we'll be happy. But we do not know that by increasing the temperature, we shall never be happy. Means the intensity of engagement in material life. We have to decrease the temperature, just cool down and become Krishna conscious more. There's a nice story, I may have told you it before, of a rich householder whose wife and maidservant were both sick. The gentleman called a doctor who treated both the patients. The doctor said, "Your wife has a temperature of 98 degrees. It's not serious. But your maidservant has a temperature of 104, so she should be taken care of." The housewife became angry and told the doctor, "I'm the head of the family. I have a temperature of only 98, and my maidservant has a temperature of 104. You're not a doctor." From 104, we want to go higher, and at 104, death will come. Yes. Modern civilization is raising the temperature. We've come to the point of 107 degrees, atom bomb. We're prepared to kill ourselves. So we have to decrease the temperature of our, the intensity of our involvement in material life. And then verse 26, those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme, in the very near future. Wow, that's nice, isn't it? That's really nice. Let's just have a look here. So the thing is, first point Prabhupada makes is that of all the people who are trying for salvation, liberation, spirituality, and so on like that, the Krishna conscious people are the best. And Prabhupada quotes Bhagavatam. So, but the majority of people, they're not on that level. So it's very, and even these desires are so deep-rooted that it's even difficult for great sages to control them. But, well, Prabhupada, let me just read the last little paragraph. The fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly, by engagement in Krishna consciousness. And this way he doesn't feel the pangs of material existence. The state of life is called Brahma Nirvana, the absence of material miseries, due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. Yes. Right. So it's very nice. Very ecstatic life of the devotees, free from anger and all material desires, due to being engaged in Krishna conscious activity, and therefore they're not troubled by those things. Their experience of life is just different. It's on a higher level, blissful level. And there is a question here, another of our special questions based on this verse 26. And there's an excerpt from Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 11, verse 31, which says, it's an excerpt, just a part. Control your anger, for anger is the foremost enemy on the path of spiritual realization. This is said in a few places actually in the Bhagavatam, that anger may be the greatest enemy of spiritual realization. So you just have to learn the verse number. All right, so now we're on to the last section. Second to last. It's just 2 verses. And it's verses 27 and 28, and it's preliminary, an introduction into liberation through ashtanga yoga, which is to a large extent the subject of chapter 6, which we're going to be going on to on Monday. Right, so verses 27 and 28 together, I guess. 27, 28, they are together. Let's read them. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the 2 eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils. Whoa. And thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who's always in this state is certainly liberated. Now the thing is, like we said, this is an introduction to it's a preview of the next chapter, or at least a fair part of the next chapter. And it's not really connected with what we've been reading in this 5th chapter. It's not really. It's not that this devotee who's doing all these things and who's free from all these moods and emotions and whatever is doing these things. This is just for interest's sake, you could say. So we won't really go into them, because we're going to go into the whole thing starting on Monday. But basically the point is about controlling the senses. Prabhupada says one has to drive out the sense objects such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell by the pratyahara process. It's ashtanga yoga. It means there are 8 different divisions. One of them is pratyahara. So in this pratyahara stage, You have to drive out the sense objects. Okay. Yeah. But ultimately, Srila Prabhupada says, it's in the last paragraph, I think. Is it? Yeah. It's the last sentence even, or two, of the last paragraph. A Krishna-conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. So in other words, you don't need to do these things if you're a devotee. And the advanced devotee does not do these things. And we as practitioners, beginners, we don't need to do these things. Although it is a fact that some people do these things, and they're going to be described in the 6th chapter, as we said. Yeah, so this is a Krishna-conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by ashtanga yoga, than by what has just been described in these 2 verses. So now finally, the peace formula, verse 29, last verse in the chapter and very important verse. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. The basic idea is that, first of all, we have to be fully Krishna conscious. Then we must know that Krishna is or should be the one who benefits, who enjoys the results of all sacrifices and austerities. In other words, of everything we do. Krishna should be the enjoyer, not us. And that he is the proprietor, the Lord of all planets and demigods, not us. Not only is he the Lord of all planets and demigods, but he's also the Lord of your house, where you live. It's not that you are the Lord of your house, Krishna's the Lord of everything else. He's the proprietor. And he is the one who can help all the living entities, not us. Although we can help them by connecting them with him, and then he will help them. And when you're in this consciousness, free from proprietorship, free from independent enjoyment, free from proprietorship, free from thinking that you can save everybody because you're such a cool person, then you can become peaceful. Until then, forget it. You can't become peaceful. Okay, there we go, devotees. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Radha Radhanath, Shri Giri Govardhan, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai.